everybody, welcome to Snyder's Inc. And today we got top 5 unknowns and we got 5 creepiest mysteries ever that are strange and scary. If you guys are having trouble hearing me right now, I apologize. I have tried doing anything to make this mic in settings and not louder, and it is not working. And if you guys can barely hear me and it's at the point where actually hearing me is too difficult, or it's just too damn quiet, y'all don't want to hear me, I will go back to the old mic. Because I can't do anything else to make this louder. I have tried. So just letting you guys know that. I figured out the echo issue, though, so I don't think we should have that problem. Let me know for sure, but I'm pretty sure I've dealt with that. I think we're good there. But this is 5 creepiest mysteries ever that are strange and scary. We'll get right into this. Ladies and gentlemen, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment, dig down below. Let's go.
Some of the strangest mysteries in the world are those that may possibly have paranormal or supernatural explanations. When we don't fully understand the solution to a mystery, is it possible for the mystery to ever really be solved? Number 5. The uncanny valley effect describes people being unnerved or even scared of things that resemble humans but aren't quite right. The creepy phenomenon is used to explain our uneasiness around certain animation techniques, human-looking robots, and dolls. Of the things that display the uncanny valley effect, dolls are possibly the ones most of us come into contact with the most. Those who didn't have dolls growing up knew someone who did, and there's something undeniably creepy about the plastic, porcelain, or plush faces.
It depends on the doll. It depends on the doll. There are some dolls, like that one clown doll, y'all know what it is, the one jester doll, that just gives me completely unnerves me to its core. I can never not be unnerved by it. But there are some that are just perfectly fine. I don't have any reaction to it. But there are some dolls, I'll admit, that just completely give me the heebie-jeebies.
It's not surprising then that dolls are some of the most widely reported haunted artifacts around the world. As well as the uncanny valley effect making them unnerving to look at, there's the fact that children playing with dolls may treat them as if they're real, and form unsettling attachments to them that may add to their haunted quality. Robert the Doll is one of the most famous haunted dolls, and nobody is quite sure just what caused him to become paranormal. The story of Robert the Doll dates back to the early 1900s, and a boy named Robert Eugene Otto, who went by the name Gene. The Ottos were a prominent family living in Key West, Florida. Gene's parents had moved to the States from Germany and still kept in touch with their relatives back in Europe. Gene was the youngest son of Thomas and Minnie Otto, born in 1900. He had 2 older brothers and a sister. When Eugene was about 4 years old, he received the creepy-looking doll. Even those who don't know about Robert's curse might find the doll creepy to look at.
I have an old doll. Very old doll. It's not one of the ones that unnerves me, though. I think dolls become supernatural because they, supernatural, paranormal, because the person who owns it forms a connection to that doll. And so the energy and the spirit of that person goes into the doll once that person has passed away. It goes to what it's most attached to afterwards.
His face is only vaguely humanoid, with a bump for a nose and a smile formed into a smirk. He's made from straw-like material and is covered in felt. Around his face and body are brown nicks said to resemble scars. He has blonde hair and a sailor suit that once belonged to Gene. Robert is about 3 feet tall and has very realistic proportions. Gene received the doll for his birthday and gave it his own name. According to the story, he had originally answered to Robert, but would only now go by Gene. He instantly fell in love with the doll, taking him everywhere, which would have been difficult given its size. It wasn't long before the other household members began to notice strange happenings. Like any child, Gene spoke to his doll. His parents would often hear him talking to the doll when they were in the other room. Then they heard a much lower voice. When they would go in to check who Eugene was talking to, they found only Eugene and his doll. Robert also seemed to move without any help, appearing in places he didn't have access to. His facial expression might also change. Gene's other toys would end up torn or ruined. When Gene was confronted about his wrongdoing, he responded that Robert did it. According to one story, things escalated one night when the Ottos were in bed. They were woken by screams coming from Gene's room and the sound of furniture being moved around. When they got inside the room, they found Gene curled up and Robert sitting at the end of his bed. Despite the chaos being caused by Robert, the Ottos didn't get rid of the strange doll, and instead they banished it to the attic. Robert would
They're like, we spend a whole $20 on this doll. A whole $20. You ain't getting rid of this doll. It's $20. I told them my hard-earned money. We are not getting rid of this damn doll. I was good hard money spent.
remain there until years later. In the meantime, Gene had grown up with a love of art and studied architecture at university. He also studied in Europe for a short time, where he met and married Annette Parker. The young couple returned to the US in the 1930s and worked composing music for a while before moving back to Key West in the 40s. Gene and Anne moved into Gene's old home after Gene's parents had passed away. Gene was finally reunited with his old doll. Despite the creepy experiences growing up, Gene was delighted to find Robert. Anne was less certain about the doll. It's not known about the paranormal horrors that had occurred when Gene was growing up, but Anne could see how close her husband was with Robert now. She would not stay in the same room as him, and eventually Gene made up the attic to be a room for the doll. Robert apparently didn't like being trapped in the attic again, even though it was refurbished. The Ottos and guests heard footsteps in the attic and the sound of a child giggling. School children who would walk past the house noticed Robert looking down at them from the window. In some variations of the story, there wasn't even an attic window. Robert had teleported to the bedroom that Gene had slept in as a child, and children reported that they would see him move between different windows and sometimes be mocking them. They would often take other routes to avoid having to walk in front of the house. In later years, Gene became more and more attached to the doll. He was working as an artist and converted Robert's room into a studio so he could work with Robert at his side. According to a neighbor, Anne confided in her that whenever Gene was mean to her, he would tell her that Robert did it. By the time Gene passed away in 1974, the legend of his haunted doll was well known. When Anne sold the house to neighbor William Geyser, Robert came with it. William
Why? Like, listen, I need you to buy his house. Like, what's it? Like, you took everything out. All about that doll. That fucking doll's staying with you, brother. You want this house, that doll is staying with you. Do whatever with it, what you please, but that doll is not coming with me.
William took the role of being Robert's caretaker very seriously. Myrtle Reuter, who bought the house after William, was the same. In fact, she became even more attached to the doll. She would dress him in children's pajamas and leave him next to the Christmas tree on Christmas Eve. When Myrtle moved out of the Otto's old home, she took Robert with her. That seemed to upset Robert, and he became more volatile, moving around the house. Myrtle tried locking him in a room, which only resulted in angering Robert, and Myrtle becoming locked in a room with no explanation. Myrtle
Has there been a movie based off Robert? Or a YouTube series based off Robert? Because there's some stuff you can do with him.
Donated Robert to Fort East Martello Museum in 1994, where he's resided ever since. The paranormal activity hasn't stopped. Visitors to the museum are warned not to disrespect Robert, and doing so might cause bad luck. They must introduce themselves to the doll, give their name and where they're visiting from. Ask permission before taking a photo, then thank the doll after the photo is taken. Number 4. In March of 1997, a very strange event was witnessed in the skies above the Peak District in England. Officially, the mystery remains unexplained, which has led to countless strange and sometimes paranormal theories. In the early winter months of 1997, there were a lot of people looking up at the sky. The Hale-Bopp comet had first become visible to the naked eye in May of 1996, but was not visible in December. It reappeared in January and was bright enough to be seen even in the cities. On March 22nd, it began its final approach towards Earth, and people would spend the evening and night looking up at this phenomenon. So there were a lot of people looking up on the evening of March 24th, 1997. But while the comet was perfectly visible in one part of the night sky, viewers saw something completely different in another. For most, it wouldn't be until news broke about a flurry of activity the following day that they realized what they had seen. It was just after 10 o'clock at night when the emergency service operators received the phone calls about a strange event. Two farmers in the village of Bolsterstone, near Sheffield, called 999 to report what they thought was a plane crash. They had been outside when they spotted a very low-flying plane traveling at low speed. It had its navigation lights on, but didn't have any other illumination. It passed by their home and continued towards a moorland ridge. They then spotted an orange glow and plumes of smoke and smelled something burning. Shortly afterwards, another call came from gameskeepers.
Wait, so you just reported a plane crash because they saw orange glow smoke, assumed there was a fire and a crash from this plane they saw go over their house. Then the person, they called it in and they went to the site and nothing was found? Is that what I'm supposed to believe?
In a nearby village that sits on the other side of the Peak District National Park to Bolsterstone. There, the couple heard what they described as an almighty bang, so loud that it drowned out their TV. They couldn't hear anything else but ringing afterward. The noise came from the moors, and the couple rushed outside to see what had happened. There was no sign of any crash or impact. The couple called the police to report the incident anyway, and one set off in a Range Rover to try to find more information. He spotted what he described as an eerie red glow in the sky to the south. The calls were so specific and troubling that police from the surrounding counties set out to try and find what had happened. The first stage of the investigation was checking with local airports and RAF bases to see if there was any explanation there. Nobody had a missing plane accounted for, and no radars in the area reported seeing anything out of the ordinary. At first, the RAF reported that there were no military exercises happening in the area either, even though it was relatively common for them to take place. The residents around the Peak District were used to military operations, but this didn't seem like anything any of them had seen before. A search of the moors began, but there was nothing that could help to narrow down a location. The search area was 50 square miles of difficult terrain that included moors and reservoirs. Specialist mountain rescue teams and a helicopter borrowed from an RAF base that specializes in sea rescues were involved in the mission. A dangerous flying zone was set up to stop civilian and military craft from getting in the way of the search operation. In total, 15 hours were spent searching the moors for any sign of wreckage or any explanation for what happened. The operation cost more than $50,000 and was the biggest in the region, and they found nothing. There was no wreckage, burned vegetation, or even oil slicks in the water. There was no sign that anything had taken place. The search made headlines both locally and nationally. And
I'm not surprised, because if I had a bunch of specific phone calls about, people seeing a crash and then there's no crash to take place, I'd be very curious on what the hell's going on.
Over the following day, more people reported what they had seen. From about 7 p.m. until 10, countless residents in neighboring towns and villages had spotted something strange in the night sky. Many of those reported an extremely low-flying aircraft, so low that it seemed as if it might crash into their homes. The aircraft was then followed by a number of military aircraft. A retired RAF officer named John Brassington was among those that heard the aircraft. He first heard a single-engined light aircraft flying low and circling overhead. Minutes later, he heard two more aircraft which he was certain were jet fighters flying so low that they shook his home. Another witness, a gamekeeper named John Littlewood, later reported seeing the two different kinds of aircraft. The first was what he called an old-timey plane that he didn't recognize, which only had two red lights on the ends of its wings, rather than the normal flashing strobes that would typically be seen on planes. It made a loud humming noise, flying low and slow at roughly 500 feet in altitude. Other witnesses reported hearing the humming noise without seeing anything, and others heard or saw the explosion that the two gamekeepers had originally reported.
I want to know what you all think of this mystery specifically, because I'm trying to figure out what is going on here, and I can't figure it out. How do so many people report seeing 2 to 3 aircrafts, and none of them can be accounted for?
While most of the reports were of traditional planes and jets, others reported seeing strange glowing triangle aircraft or cigar-shaped crafts, which are similar to what ufologists claim to have seen. It wasn't just eyewitness sightings that police could rely on, though. The British Geological Survey had a number of sensitive pieces of equipment in the area, including equipment designed to detect sonic events. 2 seismograph stations in the area reported sonic events that evening, and a low-frequency microphone at Leeds University recorded 2 sonic events. They took place at 9:52 p.m. and 10:06 p.m., the latter corresponding exactly with the incident reported by the 2 gamekeepers. There are 3 possible causes for the sonic events. The first and most famous is Concorde, a supersonic civilian airliner that was still in operation in 1997. However, it wasn't flying over the Peak District at 9 o'clock that night. The other is a military aircraft. And finally, meteorites and space junk breaking up in the atmosphere can cause sonic events without leaving a crater. It was soon obvious that a cover-up of some kind had taken place. Eventually, the RAF admitted that there had been an exercise in the area, though it claimed that it ended at 9:30 p.m. before the sonic events. That could explain some of the unusual aircraft activity, but not all of it. The police officially ruled the event as unexplained, but concluded that there was no crashed plane on the moor. They couldn't explain what had caused people to see the event, but it was suggested as being a mixture of unrelated factors being connected, as well as people.
Yeah, I definitely want to know. Guys, Snyder Squad, let me know your theory about this, because I'm curious as hell.
For reporting ordinary aircraft that they wouldn't have thought about if it hadn't been for the wide-scale search. Some believe that the cover-up was bigger than a training exercise. For some, this was the UK's Roswell. It was suggested that the military planes had been chasing something and that it wasn't of this world. It had crashed on the moor and the dangerous flying zone had been put in place to stop civilians from seeing something they weren't meant to see. The strange humming noise could be explained by the UFO being truly extraterrestrial, especially as a number of people looked for the source of the noise but couldn't find it. Other theories suggest the military was chasing something, but that it wasn't extraterrestrial. The aircraft may have simply been involved in terrestrial illegal activity, such as a drop-off for illegal substances. Or the aircraft might not have existed at all. During the Second World War, 50 aircraft came down in the area and 200 people lost their lives. According to a Peak Park ranger, the Mountain Rescue Service was called out 2 or 3 times a year for reports of planes crashing in the moor, only for them to turn out to be echoes or reflections of the past. Normally, these giant ghost planes are silent and go unnoticed by most. But with more people looking up at the sky that night due to the comet, it's possible that a ghost plane attracted too much attention and caused the military to respond. Whatever the case, it's possible the truth behind this event is known to certain individuals, whether it was simply a mundane exercise being covered up or something much stranger. Number 3. Beneath England, there lie labyrinth-like tunnels that stretch for 3.5 miles. In the event of a nuclear war, this would be where the local politicians and nobility would be hidden until it was safe to come out of the bunkers. But they wouldn't be alone in the tunnels. At least 7 ghosts are thought to roam the dark passageways, creating an eerie atmosphere and spooking anybody who ventures below. The tunnels were built in 1941 and were designed by Alexander Gibbs. Unsurprisingly, given the time period, the purpose of the tunnels was to support the war effort. Around the country, car factories were being turned into factories that would supply weapons or machinery. Rover was just one of many automotive companies contributing to the war effort, and their factories were making aircraft engines for the RAF. But factories were also prime targets for air raids, so a few were built below ground. Not far from the town of Kidderminster, the Drakelow Underground Dispersal Factory was built. It was designed to craft parts for Rover's other factories, but could be converted into another factory if one of the above-ground factories were destroyed. It wasn't long before the factory developed a terrible reputation. Excavation work during 1941 wasn't too safe. While work took place on Tunnel 1, there was a tragic cave-in. A man named Harry Depper and 2 other workers lost their lives. Their names were allegedly etched into the wall where they passed away. Details of the other tragedies that took place during construction are less clear, but it's possible that up to 6 lost their lives before it was even open for operation. After that, the tragedies continued. At one point, a woman named Mary Ann Bettle passed away after an accident involving a truck. 2 more men lost their lives while riding the conveyor belt when they found they couldn't get off. All are believed to still wander the tunnels, but they're not alone. After the war, the area was given to the Ministry of Supply for storage. It would then be converted into use during the Cold War. The facilities at the Drakelow tunnels included dormitories, electrical equipment, a BBC studio for broadcasts in the case of an emergency, and a GPO telephone communications facility. It had everything that would be needed to resume government in the case World War III broke out.
Sorry if I'm to leaving screen there. I had to go do a couple things while this was playing.
Though it wouldn't have been comfortable living. There was electricity at the time, but the tunnels were still narrow in places, clearly carved out of the rock rather than having a clean finish. It was still deemed good enough to be the seat of the regional government if necessary, though. When the Cold War ended, the Drakelow tunnels were decommissioned and eventually sold to developers. It was after the site closed that more paranormal activity was added to the site. It allegedly became the site of satanic rituals, which invited a demonic entity into the halls. While most of the spirits at Drakelow are friendly, there's definitely something in the tunnels that causes dread in those that venture down there in the dark. Today, the tunnels are preserved, as local opposition stopped them from being turned into housing. That means they remain a popular destination for ghost hunters. It was the caretakers at the site
I would love to go here. Honestly, would love to go visit this.
That first reported the strange paranormal activity. In 1993, a caretaker was doing his rounds at night. It should have been 6 minutes, but the strange activity meant he spent hours below ground searching for the cause. He could hear old-timey music coming from one of the rooms. This was despite the fact that the electricity had been turned off. The caretaker followed the nose to the source, but as soon as he stepped into the room, it turned off. Confused, he continued his round, only for the music to start up again. He spent hours trying to find the source of the noise, but it would remain a mystery. The 1940s music is one of the many reported paranormal activities at the site. Other activity includes unexplained knocking, unseen hands tugging at visitors, and strange mists. In particular, the site that would have been the regional government headquarters is often visited by a mist that takes a vaguely humanoid shape. Other mists are darker in color and are reported as fires. When staff rush to the location, they find no sign of any fires, but where the mist was is extremely cold. Years later, caretaker Sid Robinson had a terrifying experience that left him with a broken foot. He was on a ladder in one of the tunnels when he felt heavy pressure on his shoulder, and he was pushed off the ladder. He didn't seem to believe it was a warning for him to leave the site, and he continued working as a caretaker at the Drakelow tunnels. But something much scarier lurks in the back tunnels. It's here that the demonic entity is said to stalk. Witnesses have seen a creature that's half man, half dog, and covered in fur. Some have even felt as if they themselves were this strange creature. This is what's believed to be brought on by satanic rituals. It doesn't seem to be trying to escape, but is happy, causing a sense of dread in those that encounter it. Other paranormal activities reported at the site are faces being spotted during recordings, shadowy figures, and electronic voice phenomena being picked up on equipment. In one paranormal investigation, a ghost was able to mimic the voice of one of the team members using a walkie-talkie, which was extremely unsettling.
If that happened, I would run out of the building. If I was out of ghost, anything haunted, and like my partner, one of my partners in ghost hunting, standing right next to me, and the walkie-talkie goes off, and I know it's not him, and his voice comes out, done. I'm done. I'm leaving. I'm wanting out of there. No, I don't need anything else.
Number 2. Sleep paralysis is one of the most terrifying things the average person might encounter, experienced by people.
Oh God, sleep paralysis is destroying for anyone who experiences it. Lucky enough, I haven't.
Around the world, it's been the subject of myths and legends going back to ancient times. While scientists now believe they understand what causes sleep paralysis, there's one aspect that remains even more mysterious and terrifying. Roughly 8% of the general population will experience sleep paralysis at some point in their lives, with that rate increasing significantly when stress factors are introduced. When we sleep, our bodies are naturally paralyzed. This stops us from acting out our dreams during REM sleep, which means the dreams can be extremely vivid and feel real without causing our bodies to try to react to those real feelings. Normally, the only time someone might notice this paralysis is when they dream about being extremely slow or moving through a sticky substance. But there are times when that paralysis is all someone can think about. Sometimes our minds wake up, but they don't trigger the reaction that stops the paralysis. We remain in a half-waking, half-sleeping state. Normally, someone's breathing and eye movements are under their own control, but they remain paralyzed and unable to react to anything happening to them. Experiences of sleep paralysis vary, and it seems to depend very much on what someone has been told about them beforehand. For example, in Denmark, sleep paralysis is blamed on stress, and is just something that happens from time to time. It's nothing to be feared. However, the Danes appear to be the exception, as most other cultures attribute sleep paralysis to something supernatural and terrifying. Even people who haven't heard stories about sleep paralysis are terrified by what they experience. Being unable to...
I mean, I was gonna say, because I don't think I would look at it as, it's just something that happens. Don't think that's how I would see sleep paralysis, because that's terrifying to experience. All the stories I've heard, terrifying to experience. Stuff I've read online, stories I've heard online, terrifying. It's not a normal thing. It's not something that we should look at as just something that just happens. It doesn't just happen. It shouldn't be that case.
Move is bad enough, but the sensation is often accompanied by something else being in the room with the sleeper. The so-called sleep paralysis demon might linger in the corner, on the other side of the window, or beside the bed. The most terrifying of these creatures might hover above the sleeper, or even sit on their chest. The sleeper feels the sensation of someone or something pushing down on them, and they're unable to get it off. What these creatures are varies from place to place, and seems to largely be what you expect them to be. There are a few of these creatures that come up time and time again. The first is a hag-like woman, one of the demons that frequently sits on the chests of her victims. Less physical are shadow people, who are more likely just to stand and watch the helpless victim. The third is the HATMAN. It's easy.
HATMAN back, everybody! HATMAN's back! Another HATMAN sighting scene here on Snyder's Inc.
To understand why witches and shadow people have been seen by people around the world, even for those that don't believe in the supernatural. Witches are a widespread superstition, and plenty of cultures have traditional spirits that look like elderly, decrepit people. Shadow people are another phenomenon experienced around the world. Those that don't believe in the supernatural explain them as our minds seeking patterns out of nothing. But the HATMAN is something else entirely. The creature is described as being...
I love this. I don't know what. There is going to be merchandise from me directed towards HATMAN. You better damn believe if I do merchandise, HATMAN will become a part of the merchandise.
Between 6 and 10 feet tall. It wears a trench coat or a cloak, and a wide-brimmed hat. Sometimes the hat is pointed, but it's often flat. Some versions of the HATMAN go into detail, with descriptions of old-fashioned clothes and a golden pocket watch, which it will look at on occasion. Others describe the being as featureless or only having red eyes. The HATMAN usually stands in the corner or beside the bed, watching its victim before walking out the door. Others have experienced it hovering over their beds. In most of the stories, it isn't physically violent, but does create a dread that's described as being worse than anything created by any of the other sleep paralysis demons. One writer, who had had a variety of sleep paralysis experiences, described coming face to face with the HATMAN as being unlike anything else they had experienced, and other sleep paralysis demons paled in comparison to it. Others have described the fear of the HATMAN as being something hardwired into humanity, as if avoiding this strange creature had been key to human survival for thousands of years. Other than the sheer horror caused by the HATMAN, what makes it stand out compared to other recurring sleep paralysis demons is just how random the figure is. There are no recurring stories of demonic figures with wide-brimmed hats in folklore around the world. There also wouldn't be any reason for our minds to pick out this image over any other humanoid figure. Why the HATMAN is so prevalent is something that experts aren't entirely certain about, and there are a number of more paranormal explanations for this creepy figure. Some believe that he may be a special kind of shadow figure. While some do dismiss shadow figures as merely being tricks of the eyes, there are those that believe the creatures are paranormal entities. Shadow figures are humanoid figures wrapped in darkness. Normally though, there are no distinguishing features that can be made out, though they can project a fear into their victims. They're normally only visible out of the corner of your eye, but there are an unlucky few that have gotten a clearer vision of these strange creatures. At first, the HATMAN seems to have a lot of characteristics with shadow people, but there are some key differences. For instance, shadow people are known to dissolve into thin air, while the HATMAN normally leaves a room by walking through a door, whether it's open or not. Another explanation for this strange creature is that it might be some kind of demonic entity that has decided to take on this form. According to one story, a man in Germany asked the creature who it was, and it simply replied, "Scratch," implying that
Wait a minute, it's a demonic troll. So this demonic presence is just a one big demonic troll. It shows up in sleep paralysis, causes a feeling of dread, leaves you not, and then just leaves you completely terrified, and then just leaves. And lets you deal with it yourself afterwards. That is somewhat sick. I almost appreciate it. Because if it is a demonic presence, it is one truly messed up demonic presence.
It was the devil himself. Alternatively, it may be some kind of interdimensional being. This has been used to explain ordinary shadow people too, but it may also explain the HATMAN and its unique appearance. The theory goes that worlds or dimensions that run alongside our own may overlap or come close in places, allowing us to see creatures on the other side. It's possible that the HATMAN's strange attire is what gives it the ability to look into our world. Some less supernatural theories suggest that the figure in a wide-brimmed hat stems from the stereotypical image of law enforcement or government agents, especially in the United States. It might also come from the image of horror villain Freddy Krueger, though the HATMAN is believed to predate the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise.
I actually am fine with the police theory. Like it's used, it's what the stereotypical vision is of police officers and law enforcement. So that's what people imagine, like when they're stressed or concerned or fear that.
It's possible we may never know until someone asks the HATMAN to explain itself and we get an answer. Number 1. In 2021, a strange incident in the skies above a US Marine base in California was witnessed by more than 50 people. Officially, it was ruled as a training exercise, but that explanation hasn't convinced many, including the military personnel that witnessed the event. It was roughly 8:20 at night when the strange craft appeared in the sky above Camp Wilson at 29 Palms. 29 Palms is the world's largest Marine Corps training base. It's a 998 square mile base and sits in South San Bernardino County, California in the Mojave Desert. Training takes place on the grounds and in the airspace above the base every day. On the evening of April 20th, a few personnel were standing outside when the craft suddenly appeared. It looked triangular from their vantage point, with a series of 5 lights at the edge of the craft. Within minutes, more personnel came outside to look at this strange object, which was unlike anything any of them had seen before, and people began to film the craft. In videos, the Marines laughed and joked about it being aliens or the end of the world, but it was clear that none of them had an actual explanation for what they were seeing. The lights resembled the infamous Phoenix Lights, a mass UFO sighting that produced some of the most famous photos of V-shaped UFOs. On the night of March 13, 1997, thousands of people in Arizona witnessed something that they could not explain. A series of lights traveled from the border with Nevada, past Phoenix, and to Tucson. The event took place between 7:30 and 10:30 p.m., though there were two distinct objects spotted. The first was a series of 5 lights flying in a V formation. The second was a string of stationary lights above the city of Phoenix. In this case, the official explanation for the events was flares launched by civilians and military during a training exercise, though some still believe the UFOs originated from something completely out of this world. In the 29 Palms, it would make sense for skeptics to believe this was also a case of flares. The base is known for its regular training exercises, and the flares would have been a familiar sight to all stationed there. But the fact flares would have been so familiar makes it easy to rule out. At one point during the footage, one of the witnesses noted that nobody would fire flares in that formation. Later, witnesses explained further. Normally, flares are launched one at a time and used to illuminate something in the sky that would become a target. Even if someone had decided to launch the flares in that strange formation, the color didn't match the flares used on the base. Flares would also have fallen. Witnesses reported that the craft hovered over the base for more than 10 minutes completely silent. But the biggest thing that ruled out it being flares to those on the ground was the fact that they could see the outline of the craft itself. It's natural for humans to see a string of distant lights and imagine a line connecting them, but in this case, they could actually see the vehicle. It was described as being half the size of a US football field, or the size of a 3-bedroom house. What this was truly enormous. It was also unlike any craft any of the personnel on the base had seen before. One of the witnesses said it resembled the size of a particular steel aircraft, but pointed out that this kind of jet could not hover. At 8:29 p.m., it was decided to launch an illumination flare above the aircraft so as to get a better look at what it was. This was also captured on camera, showing distinctly how different the normal flares that are used were from whatever these lights were. Before the object could be illuminated, though, it blinked out of existence. The video itself seemed to show all the lights turning off, but those at the base confirmed that the aircraft had disappeared. Shortly afterwards, there was a flurry of activity. A number of helicopters were launched and stayed above the base for hours, presumably looking for the aircraft. Witnesses also described a convoy of trucks being sent out, but then there was nothing. The following day, journalist Jeremy Corbell was contacted by someone he described as high up at the base, and was told that something had happened that he should check out. Corbell is an investigative journalist known to focus on UFO activity. He was the only civilian named during a hearing in Congress in May of 2022 where UFOs were discussed. He also lives near the base. Corbell didn't get much information in the initial phone call, but Marines who saw the aircraft were happy to talk to him and share their video and photo evidence of this strange phenomenon. For more than 2 years, Corbell worked on the story, trying to find out more information. It seemed as if there hadn't been a proper investigation by the military. The all-domain anomaly resolution—
No, military's not gonna do an actual full-on investigation. Absolutely not. They probably don't even want to know the answers, even if it was a UFO. They don't want to know that actual answer.
Office, which was set up to investigate UAPs or unknown aerial phenomenon, had no record of the event. That in itself is strange. Why would someone tip off a journalist about this strange event without telling the internal investors? After 2 years, Corbell spoke about the incident on his podcast with co-host George Knapp, aiming to get more information so that investigators could get to the bottom of the incident. It was only after this point that news websites around the world started to report on the strange incident, which Corbell describes as a mass sighting. There was also finally a response from the military when a Department of Defense spokesperson claimed that there was a training exercise taking place at the time, which would explain what was seen. It seems unlikely that would be the case given how many Marines reported the incident and noted that it was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Often, theories about unidentified craft, especially around air bases, include new technology that the military wants to keep a secret. That also doesn't seem to be the case in this instance, as Marines were able to share photos and discuss the incident openly, something that wouldn't have happened if it was top secret. Like many UFO incidents, it's likely that somebody knows what happened at 29 Palms in April of 2021, but it might not be for a long time before we find out the truth. Thank you guys so much for
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all for the next one.